the laws of averages, you're going to have one or two out of 18,000. Just like you got 5 kids, you're going to have that one kid you can't do anything with in terms of getting the homework done and all these other types of things, sometimes. So these things do happen. But what I am glad to see is that everyone understands now. Now, this doesn't mean you're doing the right thing for the right reason. You might be doing the right thing because you don't want to be on CNN. Mm-hmm. But everyone knows now that there are cameras out there. Everyone has a camera. Whether it's Miss Johnson's 5th grade class with all their cameras or whether it's the folks that are coming out of the club at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So now people are on their P's and Q's for the most part.
Right, and misbehaving.
Exactly. They don't want to be caught misbehaving.
Sure.
So, but I think that it's just incumbent upon, again, and you're going to keep hearing me say this, it's a collaborative effort that's going to make the change. Folks have to be involved in their police departments. You're paying for it. You're writing the checks. Those are your tax dollars. You have to be involved. From the police perspective, you have to work with your stakeholders.
Yeah.
With the training, with all the things that you can share with the community you need to share, because that makes it better. So that when something does happen, the community leaders can say, hey, Chief Connor has been really good with us in terms of sharing things and bringing us in. So let's give him a chance to look into this. Right. And then if we feel we need to protest or do some other things, we'll do that. But let's give him and his department the chance because they have been working with us through, every step of the way.
Right.
That's the only way it's going to change. No agency in the country can be successful without the support of the community. I don't care what anybody tells you.
And I believe that. And I also think that, and I'm going to put this out there, every police officer or agency is not terrible. It's not bad. It's not corrupt. I do want to establish that truth. You have some men and women of all races, creed, religions, gender, or whatever, who are sacrificing their life on a daily basis. However, that's not what's being publicized, Chief.
Absolutely. You're right.
And what's being published has greater influence.
Yes, it does.
And it develops a perception and a mindset to those who are immature, teenagers in this millennial generation that they're already rebellious, these renegade type kids or whatever. They're looking for a reason not to honor and not to respect. A lot of these children never even had an experience with law enforcement. However, what's being published has a greater influence and it kind of monitors their experience. And so if we want to see it, if we want to see a change in the relationship between the community and law enforcement, there has to be a level of trust.
That's correct.
There has to be a level of trust. And somehow, some way, we have to teach people that everything you see is not the reality of it. Some things are embellished. You can't take 2 seconds of a video and publish it and determine that's what really happened, because it causes the people to sway to a certain side. And now they're looking at police as a whole as being unintegral. So, how do we attack that?
Well, we're going to, that's a great point, Pastor C, and we'll talk about messaging here in just a few seconds, but I'd like to get a caller in. And so we're going to have our engineer bring our next caller in and just kind of hear what they're having to say about this conversation and get some additional perspective on this topic of policing in America. Does everyone feel protected and respected? Okay, I think we may have lost our caller, but that's okay. We'll get to the next caller. But anyway, Pastor C, you were talking about that's the only thing that you see, and that gets right back to the heart of messaging.
Yes.
It's incumbent upon the agency and see, part of messaging also is that collaborative piece.
Yeah.
Because now I can do all this kind of stuff with Instagram and twittering and twattering and all the other things that are out here. You know what I mean? But if I have credibility now and I have a presence in the community is going to take my message out. Now, I can put stuff out all day long. Hey, be a part of the Anywhere Police Department, and we're recruiting and we're hiring. Do you know what the people in the barbershop are going to believe when that guy walks in and says, hey, man, I was just at this thing with the police the other day, man. You should have seen all the neat stuff they had there and the discussions that we had.
Right.
That message will get out because now it's word of mouth on top of Twitter.
Right.
And all you had to do was to bring the folks through the door, you know, and engage them in a way that shows we want to work with you.
Yes.
But it's a two-way street, because I can remember a hair salon about a year and a half ago. There was this big game, you know, going on. I forgot what, you know, it was a football game. And the hair salon went to the police department to say, hey, we want to honor our police, and we'd like for the police to come in on that day to watch TV with us. We'll have snacks and everything, and we'll give them free haircuts or, you know, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And police department, yeah, you know, we're down with that. Not one person showed up.
Well, and again, that says a couple of things. Your messaging, and folks didn't necessarily feel that there was a connection there. You know, if you're going to have an outing like that, then it's incumbent upon you to have that relationship, number one. And if you don't, you have to work at it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, if you look at all kinds of relationships, when you met your wife, you know, now, well, for you, Pastor C, she probably looks at you and say, hey, I want to get married right now. but for the normal guys like me, I had to work at it. You know what I mean? I had to work at it. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. You know what I mean? It takes time.
It really does.
So if the first time you invite the community out on that date and they say no, well, you have to go back again and say, what about now? What about now? Let me show you. This is what we're about. This is what we're about. Mm-hmm. Eventually, you will have some success. At first, you may not. People, you know, they'll flip you the bird or say, hey, man, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
You have to work at that.
It takes time.
It does.
It was the police department.
What'd you say?
It was the police department.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that did not show up.
Well, in that case, then that tells you that there's no relationship. Mm-hmm. Because if the police department felt that it was important enough, they would have been out there. They would have been there from start to finish. So that shows that there was a serious disconnect in that community between the community and the police department. Or if the police department wasn't aware of it, shame on them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if there is no relationship, shame on the community and shame on the police department.
Right.
Because a relationship is a two-way street.
I believe that.
You know, it has to be a two-way thing. And so you can't just throw it all on the police department. They certainly have a lot going on. They have a lot of irons in the fire, but they will not be successful if the folks who have given you the authority, you see, police have the authority based on the powers that have been granted to them by the community.
Sure.
And legislatively. So the legislative body is a branch of the community, and they have said that we have enough respect and faith in you, in your training and in your background, that we're going to give you the authority to detain people, mm-hmm. to seize their property, and if necessary, to take a life, if you are doing your duty diligently and responsibly. So that is a huge undertaking.
A lot of power.
And so you just can't have, and that's why this job is not made for everyone. Because,
and I'm glad you said that.
Yes, sir.
It's not made for everyone. Now, I went through a process, and I was going to be a part of the police force here in Nevada, and my pastoring kind of did not give me an opportunity to be a part of it. But I looked at the guys who were filling out the applications and stuff. A lot of them, now I'm not stereotyping or anything like that. A lot of them were young, very ambitious, fresh military guys that just came from the military, probably have not been around a lot of quote unquote challenged communities, which to me serves as a disadvantage to a degree because they don't know how to engage people. And when you don't know how to engage people, you can mistake a behavior and it can cause a problem to escalate because you don't have people skills. Is that true that sometimes some people shouldn't even be in a uniform and have a badge because they don't have a heart for what they're doing? And yes, they are human first. And sometimes their personal views, to me, kind of seep out behind that badge or from that badge, and they begin to treat people how they feel they should be treated instead of just honoring all mankind the same way.
But Pastor Kerry, that goes back to my comment about these farm boys.
Yeah.
Okay, from these very rural areas, and then they go back home. Okay,
And they're not a part of the
and they're not
community.
part of the community, and they don't. It's exactly the same thing.
In Chicago, you could not police in Chicago if you did not live in Chicago.
See, I agree with
So your address had to be a Chicago address, which means you're not from somewhere else coming over and trying to police a community that you're not acquainted with. And I just feel sometimes you're at a disadvantage when you're called to serve and protect the people, that your finger is not even on the pulse of that community.
And that's been a discussion for many years in terms of whether or not the officers should live in the community or not. Many agencies have tried, and the courts in some cases have said that that's not appropriate.
Wow.
That you can't do that. So in the meantime, I think it's so incumbent that agencies have to look at how do we get officers to feel that they have a stake in the community.
Right.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but let's get this caller in,
Yes.
and so we can get the caller's perspective. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, this is, I'm sorry, I feel an echo, but this is Dr. Douglas. I'm calling from Florida. And I wanted
Hi,
to
Dr.
join
Douglas.
the conversation because I heard some key words mentioned when talking about police communication and communication within the neighborhood, within the community. And I'm beginning to feel that the conversation is leading to the people in the neighborhood need to be trained how to talk to the police. And I didn't hear anything about the police needing to be trained how to talk to people in the neighborhood. And that's a real issue nationwide, especially in large cities.
Sure.
For instance, verbal communication skills. It's not taught in the academy. It's touched on in the academy. And then as they leave the academy, it said, okay, forget about everything you learned here and just go out there and do your job. But, of course, continuing education is needed, but then we need the officers in the street, so when do they get the education? So it's a catch-one is catch-two situation. And officers, unless they have been trained prior to coming into the academy on communication skills, they may not know that they need to adjust based on the situation and the person they're talking to.
Sure. Well, Dr. Douglas, and it's always good to hear from you. Earlier on, we actually were talking about the need for better communication skills. We were talking particularly about the need for cultural diversity training, communication skills, de-escalation techniques, because it's so important that the officers or the sheriffs or the troopers, they have to have that tool in their toolkit in order to have dialogue, to solve cases, to encourage community participation. So you're absolutely right, and we did allude to that earlier, that it is so important that the officers are trained and retrained. As a matter of fact, we talked earlier about chiefs all over the country are spending thousands of dollars to train recruits and the veteran officers every year in de-escalation